Hey there, I am near Holbrook, Arizona at the Petrified Forest National Park. I have been really wanting to visit this national park for a long time, and today I'm here. So let's see what the Painted Desert and the Petrified Forest has to offer. This trip to Petrified Forest National Park will be split into 4 separate videos. So in this part we'll cover the world famous Painted Desert. So the first stop is going to be the Painted Desert Visitor Center. This visitor center is at the Painted Desert Community Complex, one of the most expansive projects of Mission 66. Mission 66 improved and modernized national park infrastructure during the 60s, and this complex was built between 1961 and 1965. Clearly the architecture isn't exactly rustic. It's a modernist international style complex designed to blend in with the environment. And remember, this would have been cutting edge in 1965. This mid-century multi-purpose complex, designed by Richard Nuestra, is unlike any other in the national parks. And it is a National Historic Landmark. Appropriately, there are some petrified wood stumps. We're going to be seeing a lot of those in this park. One building has a small diner with a jukebox, though I'm not going to eat here. And there is also an extensive gift shop. Now let's explore the Painted Desert. Here's a great first look at the Painted Desert at Toponi Point. Really, the desert extends to over 7,500 square miles around here, but this is perhaps the most colorful section of it. And here's a leftover from the Find Your Park initiative. Tawa Point has a slightly different view over the Painted Desert. The mudstone and sandstone rocks were deposited over 200 million years ago, when the Pangea supercontinent broke apart, and over time the rocks were deeply buried, then they were uplifted and eroded into the colorful badlands seen here today. That is really impressive. I will say there is not much in the way of petrified wood in the Painted Desert section of the park, but there are some clusters of stumps down there. I believe in the early days of the park there was much more petrified wood at the Painted Desert, but much was taken by visitors up until the 60s, so there isn't too much left. Most of the petrified wood is in the other sections of the park anyway. Over yonder is the next destination, a very historic national park inn. This is the Painted Desert Inn, an authentic rustic national park lodge. The original inn on this site was known as the Stone Tree House. It was built in the 1920s out of petrified wood, but it was built on a faulty foundation and had to be largely replaced with this Pueblo style masterpiece in the 1930s. The Civilian Conservation Corps built the current structure between 1937 and 1940. After World War II, Mary Jane Coulter, who designed many fantastic classic buildings at the south rim of the Grand Canyon and did interior design for many of the region's Grand Harvey hotels, renovated the interior of the Painted Desert Inn. The Fred Harvey Company operated this hotel from 1947 to 1963 when it closed. This building was actually going to be demolished, but thankfully it was saved. So the Painted Desert Inn has not operated as a hotel for over 50 years now, but it has been restored as a museum. However, I am very disappointed to find it closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. That really sucks. I was looking forward to this. Anyways, we can peek through some windows and take a look at this restored dining room. Looks like this was the kitchen for the hotel's restaurant. This hotel was located very close to the original route of Route 66, so this can technically be considered an authentic Route 66 inn, along with being an authentic National Park inn. This place is perfect for me. And let's take a peek at what a room looked like for travelers over 80 years ago. The Painted Desert Inn is also a National Historic Landmark. There are 2 National Historic Landmarks located within miles of each other here. There are also some outbuildings. Those may have been Pueblo cabins visitors could stay in. The Painted Desert Inn is perched atop a bluff overlooking the Painted Desert. So let's look at the views from the inn. That would not be a bad view to wake up to. Not bad at all. I will definitely be coming back to go through here after it finally reopens. Moving on to Pintado Point, facing toward the western side of the Painted Desert. You can see the Hopi Buttes and the San Francisco Peaks way off in the distance. There are some ravens that call the Painted Desert home, or maybe they're just tourists. Here at Whipple Point, there is a placard emphasizing the importance of the Painted Desert as a critical travel corridor. Lieutenant Whipple passed this way in 1853 while surveying a railroad route from the Mississippi River to the Pacific. Also, the Beale Wagon Road of the late 1850s passed right through here, along with the Overland Mail Star Route, a transcontinental railroad still here today, and the National Old Trails Highway, which was the predecessor of America's Main Street. There is also a placard about the conservation history here at Petrified Forest. Iowa Congressman John Fletcher Lacey championed the Lacey Act to protect plants and animals, along with the Antiquities Act to preserve historic places. He specifically cited and visited the Petrified Forest due to all the looting and damage being done. President Teddy Roosevelt did sign the act in 1906, and using that, designated Petrified Forest as the second national monument. Time to get some kicks on Route 66 here in the Petrified Forest National Park. Petrified Forest was the only national park that Route 66 passed through. And this is the location of the original routing of the Mother Road. This line marks the former site of Route 66, and from here it would have followed along this side of the telephone poles to Holbrook. So there is a reference point as to where it passed. However, here in the national park it has been completely replaced by dastardly Interstate 40, which can be seen in the background. To memorialize Route 66 here in Petrified Forest, they have the remains of a 1932 Studebaker, a car that would have passed right by here during the heyday. Most visitors to this national park were Route 66 travelers, and of course there is still lots of Route 66 roadside goodness nearby in Holbrook, which I have several videos on. Here's the hollowed out inside of the car. There were some roadside attractions within the park itself. Actually, right by this spot used to stand the Painted Desert Tower, an observation tower overlooking the Painted Desert. Sadly, it was demolished back in 1958, along with many other classic observation towers. I wish that were still here. Also near this spot was Painted Desert Park, also known as the Lion Farm. It was started in the 20s and had a roadside zoo with lions, and it was also demolished at some point. So all that's left to mark Route 66 here in the national park is the Studebaker, on the site where millions took the highway trip west to Southern California. This is really cool. Here Route 66 meets a national park. Those are two of my favorite things, so this is awesome. These ruins within the painted desert of the Petrified Forest are all that remain of the Puerco Pueblo. The site and its petroglyphs are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. This was a prehistoric settlement of the ancestral Puebloan people, inhabited between 1250 and 1380 CE. Here is a kiva, which served as a ceremonial chamber, and it was actually built into the ground here. The kivas here at Puerco Pueblo are noticeably smaller and more angular than the kivas of pueblos to the north, such as Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde. The structures here were built of shaped sandstone, and this pueblo once had more than 100 rooms. Only a small portion of the pueblo's masonry has been excavated, so there was a lot more to this than we can see today. About 200 people lived at Puerco Pueblo during its heyday around 1300, and the inhabitants grew corn, squash, and beans here in the Painted Desert. There was a river that passed right by here, and during summer there was always a good deal of rain here. While this specific settlement was lived in over 700 years ago, people have lived around here for over 13,000 years. Being one of the many pueblos on the Rio Puerco and the Little Colorado rivers, this place was probably visited by traders from outside the ancestral Puebloan lands who brought in different types of goods like pottery. Archaeologists have discovered some artifacts here originating from far outside Puerco Pueblo. This is the largest archaeological site within Petrified Forest National Park. I will admit I am very impressed with this park. This place has tons of petrified wood, unique geology and scenery, Route 66, and Puebloan ruins. This park has everything. This is an original entrance station to the park, built in 1935 as an entrance for visitors who arrive by train from a nearby town. Now it has exhibits inside. These signs explain the ancient history of the Petrified Forest and its more recent role as a tourist mecca. Tourists have been coming here since 1883 when the railroad came through. Then the park became popular to visit in automobiles from Route 66, which passed just a couple miles north of Puerco Pueblo. There are also some bronze Puebloan artifact reproductions to touch. And look at that! A freight train is passing through the Petrified Forest right by the 700-year-old ruins. Here you can see how much the times have changed. Behind the Puerco Pueblo, there is an overlook to see some petroglyphs. This placard points out a summer solstice marker left in the boulder. Apparently during the summer solstice, by the design of a Puebloan many centuries ago, the sunlight flows down the cleft of this boulder so that the light and shadow on the spiral petroglyph changes as the sun rises and moves across the sky. That is pretty amazing, I'd like to see that. Here are some more prehistoric petroglyphs. Looks like that one depicts a giant crane who has picked up a guy with his beak. Could also be a stork carrying a baby, or it's just eating a frog or something cranes usually eat. And that is a migration symbol. The Puebloans often migrated, and that was an important theme of Puebloan oral history. The dark coating these petroglyphs are carved in is known as desert varnish, made up of clay and minerals which, along with the dry climate, has helped these petroglyphs to last and tell their story into the 21st century. Another train is passing through the national park. I have now moved on to a nearby spot called Newspaper Rock. From this perch overlooking these series of rocks, it's hard to tell that there are actually over 650 petroglyphs adorning those rocks. The Newspaper Rock petroglyphs are also listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Since there are so many petroglyphs, it is presumed that this was an important spot for the ancestral Puebloans and that many generations added their marks to these rocks. The earliest were made about 2,000 years ago. Since there are so many petroglyphs carved over the span of 1,500 years, there is no linear storyline to the petroglyphs, but there is a variety of symbols down there. You might be able to tell some of the petroglyphs on that rock face. And there goes another train passing in the distance near this prehistoric petroglyph site. This region of the Painted Desert has a fascinating and colorful topography, so I'm gonna go find the Blue Forest trailhead for a closer look. These formations are known as the teepees, clearly made up of several colored layers of sandstone and mudstone. Now within the Blue Mesa Badlands, this is the Blue Mesa Overlook. There used to be a famous tall pedestal log out this way, but sadly it fell down in 2005. The cool national park staples don't always last forever. Now I'm gonna hike the Blue Forest Trail through the Blue Mesa Badlands, which is a pretty easy mile-long trail and a very scenic one. This may well be the best trail in the park. Blue Mesa is truly where the Petrified Forest meets the Painted Desert, as there is a bountiful supply of petrified wood along the trailside. This otherworldly landscape is an exposed part of the Chinle Formation, where mudstone was deposited by a large river system during the Triassic period of the supercontinent Pangaea around 223 million years ago, and it has since turned into badlands. Believe it or not, this was once a subtropical forest just a few degrees north of the equator, and portions of those trees have turned to stone. They are still here and being unearthed after an incomprehensible period of time has passed. The tropical forest biome here was flood prone and had volcanoes. Now there's no visible fossil evidence to tell here, but prehistoric dinosaurs and giant crocodiles once roamed among these trees. It's fun to imagine. The Blue Mesa Badlands we're seeing now are Triassic sedimentary rocks of sandstone and mudstone. The color scheme of this whole place is just fantastic, and there isn't anything quite like it. It has an interesting pastel color to it. These specimens of petrified wood are fantastic. They're pretty well preserved here on this trail. One thing about petrified wood is that they are very colorful. This is because the quartz that originally petrified this wood make it look almost like a rainbow. Wow, this was a fascinating trail. Blue Mesa is definitely an underrated feature of Petrified Forest National Park. Definitely do this trail if you visit. After leaving the depths of the Blue Mesa, I've come across some more petrified wood stumps along the roadside. If you want to see more, in fact a lot more petrified wood, then make sure to take a look at my video on the true petrified forests of this great national park, which includes the Rainbow Forest and the Crystal Forest. The Rainbow Forest Museum and the adjoining structures are among the oldest in the park, as they were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps during the 1930s. The museum was completed and opened in 1931. The Rainbow Forest Complex here used to have the park headquarters until they were moved to the Painted Desert Community Complex in the 60s. Now let's head into the museum, which is thankfully open despite the pandemic. A Phytosaur skeleton hangs above the entrance to this historic National Park museum. The Phytosaur was a common prehistoric beast here in the Petrified Forest during the late Triassic period. It was a top aquatic predator, similar to but generally a lot larger than modern crocodiles. Below it is a Phytosaur skull from a specimen discovered near Chinle, Arizona in 1927. It is 4 feet long, one of the largest ever discovered. Here's a classic box diorama featuring phytosaurs, made at UC Berkeley in 1936 by Dr. Charles Camp's team and some Civilian Conservation Corps men. A short while before they made it, a phytosaur skull had been discovered with phytosaur bite marks on it, so based on that new evidence, they depicted 2 phytosaurs battling to the death in their diorama. This is a finely polished piece of petrified wood, and this was displayed in the original Rainbow Forest Museum back in 1925. In the 20s, there were very few lapidary shops in the world that could cut and polish a chunk of petrified wood this size. It took 3 days to cut and 3 weeks to polish, but that is one beautiful specimen. This polished petrified log slice was donated in 1950 by the American Geographical Society. It took 10 hours to cut in Barre, Vermont, a town famous for cutting granite. Looks like this section of the museum is currently closed. This exhibit is about how these trees, primarily conifers like pines, cypress, and cedars, became petrified. And there is an exhibit about dinosaurs. There were dinosaurs here at the Petrified Forest, and beginning in the Triassic period, dinosaurs dominated the landscape. I will admit that there were no T-Rexes or any other major dinosaurs here. The early dinosaurs that once roamed around here were of the smaller variety. Many of these strange prehistoric beasts may look like dinosaurs, but this sign tells why the Coelophysis and the Postosuchus were not dinos. Aetisaurs were the tanks of the Triassic period. They had tons of armor plates and some had large spikes on their backs and sides. But they were primarily vegetarians. Here are some more bones of Phytosaurs. They would pretty much eat any fish or animal who dared to pass a little too close to their riverside territories. There's some fossils of a Revoltosaurus, who were initially thought to be dinosaurs, but they were not. Just another giant lizard that did not fit the criteria. There were also dinosaur imposters. They may have had a dinosaur-like appearance based on their posture and tucked legs, but they were more crocodilian. There's a Metaposaurus skull. They ruled the river bottoms by sinking into the mud, then ambushing their prey with that giant mouth. Alright, here are some more skeletons of the extinct creatures of Petrified Forest. This is a Pleucerius hesternus, a large plant-eating reptile with some mammalian qualities. This is a Rauisuchids, one of the top land predators of the late Triassic period due to its powerful jaw. While it does look like a tiny T-Rex, it was not and was actually more related to crocodiles than dinosaurs. Here is a full Aetisaurus skeleton. Like I said, he was the tank of the Triassic period, and you can see some spikes on him. And that guy on his back is a Dimorphodon from the early Jurassic period. It's here because it was very similar to a species of pterosaur that was discovered here at the Petrified Forest in 2011. So technically I don't think the Dimorphodon was here. You can see their wings were comprised of one long finger and a flap of skin. That is fascinating. Here's a dinosaur fossil largely left in the rocks as it was discovered. It takes lots of very intricate work to dig fossils out of rock for full exposure and display. I very much respect paleontologists. Alright, that was a great museum. National park exhibits can be lackluster sometimes, so I'm quite happy with that. Directly behind the Rainbow Forest Museum is the Rainbow Forest itself. And from here we can take the meandering giant logs trail around to see some petrified wood. Here is the Stephen T. Mather plaque. Just about every national park has one of these to memorialize the first National Park Service director. Mather was invaluable to the preservation of many important natural and historic sites we enjoy today. There is a rainbow visible from the Rainbow Forest. What a welcome and very fitting surprise. So there is a lot of petrified logs and stumps scattered around this place. When this region was part of the Pangaean supercontinent about 223 million years ago, it was located just a few degrees north of the equator, about where Panama is located today. So this was a thick and wet subtropical forest. home to flocking tiny dinosaurs and gargantuan crocodilians like the phytosaurs. Most of these trees were once very tall, but in time they died and fell, and over a much longer time span, they were buried by floods of sediment by the river systems. Notice that there's no bark or branches on any of these logs. It is believed that the logs were uprooted and moved a great distance from where they originally stood by the floods. And bark and branches wouldn't have survived all that before becoming fossilized. These logs became fossilized and give off a rainbow-like color scheme due to the quartz being trapped in the logs and stumps under the sediments, which caused them to become petrified. You can see that the quartz, along with a mixture of some iron and manganese, give off some brilliant color. These would probably look even brighter on a sunny day. Now I'm going to take a trail through a different part of the Rainbow Forest to see the world-famous Agate House, a historic pueblo built out of petrified wood. It's about a mile to get there, so enjoy the petrified Rainbow Forest on the way there. If you look closely on the cut sections of these stumps, you may notice the concentric banding in the wood. They are growth interruption bands caused by the fluctuating ancient environment. It would be wet, then dry, then wet again, so they are not annual tree rings. You can't tell how old the tree lived to be with the banding. There's a bunny among the petrified stumps. Though the climate has drastically changed since the Triassic tropical forest days, walking among these petrified logs is truly like walking back in time. It is an incredible experience. We're closing in on the Agate House. You can see it up on the hilltop. This is going to be interesting. The Agate House standing here today is a reproduction Puebloan dwelling that was made up of the abundant construction material around. Petrified wood. It was originally built as an 8-room Pueblo around 900 to 1050 CE, and was occupied until about 1200. So an ancestral Puebloan family lived in a petrified wood house on this hilltop. Archaeologists do believe that only one family built the Pueblo and lived in it year-round due to its size and the effort it would take to maintain a petrified wood Pueblo complex. This is definitely one of the more unique Puebloan sites I have seen. So this is not the full size of the original Agate Pueblo, but it is a partial reconstruction on the site built by the Civilian Conservation Corps between 1933 and 1934. It is built on the site and out of the original materials. However, it may not exactly be a highly accurate reconstruction of the Pueblo, but it still gives the picture, and it's really awesome. It is a historic petrified wood Pueblo people originally built and lived at 1,000 years ago. Just look at the petrified wood masonry on this structure. That is fascinating. We can look inside the petrified wood room. There's a Puebloan ladder up to the roof. And here's the expansive view from the Agate house. There is yet another rainbow in the rainbow forest. Alright, this is really spectacular. I would highly recommend making the hike out to see the Agate house if you visit. Since I have not seen a satisfactory amount of petrified wood yet, I'm gonna hit the road, drive a little north to see more petrified wood. Alright, this is the Crystal Forest Trail, an entirely different petrified forest to explore with a mile-long trail. That sign states that there is no disturbing or collecting petrified wood here, and I do agree with that. Please do not mess with the petrified forest or remove stumps. There was a lot of damage done in the early days of tourism here dating back to the 1880s by visitors taking relics and removing stumps. So there actually used to be a lot more petrified wood here, but so much has been taken over the years. However, it looks like there are still lots of remains of formerly 200-foot tall conifers along this trail. The petrified wood here has an unusually high concentration of crystals within the fossils, so look closely. There may be lots of quartz and amethyst on these logs. The petrified wood along this trail is fantastic, also a must-do hike. Now moving on to see a couple more pull-offs. This is the Jasper Forest overlook. That down there is one of the largest accumulations of petrified wood in the world. It was the first location of the Petrified Forest National Monument open to railroad tourists in the early 1900s. So those visitors would hike 6 miles from the nearest railroad station at the time to experience this otherworldly petrified forest. Unfortunately, visitors today cannot walk down there. This is an original contact station and shelter built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the early 1930s. It has been restored recently. Behind it is the Agate Bridge, a 110-foot long petrified log that originally sat on the ground, but over time the floodwaters eroded the gully beneath it to effectively turn it into an agate bridge. In 1911, due to concerns that it would collapse, they put a concrete bridge underneath it for support. So really it's a petrified log on a concrete bridge, but that is still a really cool petrified forest landmark. So that was the Rainbow Forest, Agate House, and the Crystal Forest of Petrified Forest National Park, which does live up to its title as it clearly is a true petrified forest. That was not all the park has to offer though, as there is an incredible hike at Blue Mesa with petrified wood. There is the Painted Desert section of the park with Route 66 history and other historic structures, and the Puerco, Pueblo, and petroglyphs. I have 3 separate videos on those locations, so make sure to also watch those. There are links in the description. If you enjoyed this video, then please like and share it, and also subscribe to my channel. I have tons of videos on nearby Holbrook and its petrified wood shops, along with other national parks, roadside attractions, museums, and more interesting sites all across the country. Thanks for watching.